We're going. We're on.
You have a burning question?
Yeah, get those people to stop.
Yeah, we started.
Court is in session. Both of us say so.
I do have a question.
Oh, okay, good.
I'm sorry, so you want to go first?
No, I'm just
So we often talk about consciousness and awareness and doing and observing and so forth. And I was wondering what your thoughts are about the brain's role in all of that. Neurologists and neuroscientists and so forth often will say that consciousness is produced by the brain.
Consciousness is produced by the brain to the extent in the same way that electricity is produced by a computer. The computer doesn't make electricity, the computer uses electricity. Electricity is everywhere in the universe. Matter is electricity. Reality is electricity. And if you make magnetic fields and conducting wires move in certain ways, it generates a usable flow of electricity in wires that appliances can then be plugged into to exploit it, and maybe various other ways of exploiting electricity too. But electricity reality is electricity. Electricity is one of the ways that reality appears. And likewise, consciousness is one of the ways that reality appears. As a matter of fact, I would say that what we call consciousness is reality itself. And then all the sub-phenomena of reality, like the four physical forces and electromagnetism and all these various other things, are subcategories of this primal quality which exists intrinsically. And all phenomena are outgrowths of this primal, call it primal consciousness if you want. It may not look a lot like consciousness if it's not interacting with brains or something, but it's irrelevant whether or not it interacts with brains. The electricity that's going through this computer right here isn't changed by going through the computer. When it leaves the computer, it's still electricity. Before it enters the computer, it's electricity. When it's in the computer doing all its things, it's electricity. And the electricity doesn't know, per se, that it's being used as a computer. And it's not harmed by being used as a computer, and it's not benefited by being used as a computer. And likewise with water, you can see water. Water doesn't care whether it's in the ocean or in the atmosphere or raining down or running in a stream or being drunk up by a plant and used in the leaves and then it evaporates and the whole cycle just spins around. But the water is just water. It doesn't care. And likewise, what this is, what you are, the primal consciousness, is reality itself. And whether or not it's showing up as a body, as a physical form, doesn't add or subtract anything to what's actually happening here.
So it sort of ends up to be a name for which you can't put a name to things.
Well, everything ends up like that. But yeah, sure. I mean, we have all sorts of more or less sophisticated ways of describing and analyzing reality. I mean, just look at the whole dictionary and encyclopedia and Wikipedia and all this stuff. It's all just ways of looking at this, that is, and none of them capture it. None of them are definitive. None of them say what it is, how it is. It can't be said. But it doesn't need to be said because here it is. And again, from the spiritual point of view, it's not important to define it. It's not important to know it or understand it or analyze it or be able to write a dissertation on it. But it can be known with absolute intimacy and absolute directness, and it can be known that you are that. It can be known that there is absolutely no separation between a you and reality itself. You are reality. Reality is you. And that is the powerful fact, spiritually speaking. And this can be very directly known, even though you can't explain it or analyze it or say why it's so or even how it's so.
We're so institutionalized or socialized or just so sort of used to putting things into categories and then using those categories to sort of describe events and process and what have you. And I think sometimes when you maybe come to the notion that that needs to be given up to some extent, there's not much to sort of do or say at that point. And I don't mean to suggest any sense of nihilism or like kill yourself or something other like that. It's just I don't know. Obviously, words fail.
Norman, you mean categories don't actually apply when you begin to look more primally at what reality actually is, at what's actually going on here. They just don't apply. They're inaccurate. You don't need to stop using them, but they don't accurately capture what they pretend to indicate. And so knowing that frees you from the delusion of thinking that these categories do reflect accurately what there is, and so then you are liberated from relating to your experience in terms of these categorizations. You can color outside the lines. The lines are just completely arbitrary.
Yeah, my best articulation these days is just take your hands off the controls, and the more that starts to happen, I don't know. It's like being in a movie. I don't know how to say it.
But you don't. Taking your hands off the control is good as an experiment, but it's not an ultimate recommendation. Ultimately, taking your hands off the controls, you get that. You do that as an experiment, and you discover everything keeps happening. Lo and behold, surprise, surprise. And then you put your hands back on the control, and everything still keeps happening.
Well,
so it becomes. So it's not that taking your hands off the controls per se is an improvement over having your hands on the control, but it's a very good experiment to run to see the way this actually works, to see what's actually happening here, what's actually doing it. And all of these, there's all sorts of practices that are basically experiments, and they don't. The modes of engagement or the modes of functioning in terms of these practices aren't actually intrinsically desirable in themselves, but they are as potential avenues for exploration, for discovery, as experiments. They can be valuable, and then once you have made once you've discovered that which is to be found, then it's irrelevant whether or not you are still doing the practice. It's not like doing this is desirable in itself and is an improvement over not doing it. It basically doesn't matter what you do or don't do. But discovering the profundity of that fact, the profundity of the way that is so, it can be useful to actually do these various things, and then you get the message.
Yeah.
So as I recently have been kind of actually noticing a lot of what the kinds of things that we talk about in this community, where recognizing that like there's a lot of stuff that I used to think was really important, like my job or like relationships, or I used to think those were like the center of the universe and they're really the reason that I was living and so forth, right? That's pretty normal. It's probably what most people out there think, right? And as that has shifted away dramatically, there have been some thoughts, and I don't mean to sound, don't anybody get worried, I'm not suicidal, but I've certainly had some thoughts where I was like, what's the point? Why do I even live? And I've even had occasionally some thoughts, well, okay, all this stuff that for the last 48 years of my life I thought was like the reason for living, I'm just acknowledging really isn't, then why do I even want to live? I mean, this body, this brain, this...
Do you need to want to live? Does your life come from wanting?
Does it come from wanting?
Are you here because you wanted to be here, or you just find yourself here?
No, I just find myself here.
So how important is reason really?
Okay, I hear you. I suppose that I'm looking backwards when I ask that question. I'm looking backwards at the state of mind where the reason for living had all of these attributes, all of these tasks and these agendas and so forth. And so I was doing the work of living to achieve those tasks and agendas. And now that the tasks and agendas are kind of like nonsense, I was thinking, well, then why do the work for living? And what you're saying is you're not doing work for living anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And to elaborate on that a little more, in a state of relatively greater spiritual immaturity, which let's say the majority of people more or less find themselves in, it's very common to orient towards your life and fill it up with sort of structures and frameworks to orient towards, to make sense of what you're doing. Oh, I'm doing this, I have these goals, I'm trying to achieve this, I'm trying to avoid this, I'm trying to, whatever. So you basically have a more or less large hypothetical structure that's like a game structure, that you imagine yourself to be functioning or manipulating within in various ways to try to, achieve goals, or, like I said, achieve goals, or whatever it is you're trying to do. It's basically a more or less elaborate game that essentially exists only in one's imagination. And when you find yourself breaking through into a little greater spiritual maturity, you begin to discover, wait a minute, that's a little simplistic. Maybe it's not really like that. And you begin to explore new ways of being with this, and explore what it is intrinsically, without all of this basically supplied qualifications, which basically just exist in imagination. It's like the rules of Monopoly, or just someone just dreamed them up and made this board and made these pieces, and then all of a sudden you can play Monopoly and it's this whole big thing and you really want to win. But it's not predicated on anything. It's just bootstrapped out of itself, out of nothing. And most sort of human scale approaches to life, living a successful life, living a productive life, finding fulfillment or satisfaction, boil down to essentially similar hypothetical structures, and they aren't really grounded or tied in with actuality, very much, if at all. And so, letting go of all of that and finding yourself relating to and exploring what is actually here, what's intrinsically going on, which includes and encompasses a pretty major reorientation, either suddenly or gradually or whatever, is basically what true spirituality is all about. It's about getting real. It's a reality check.
Yes.
And what is going on here turns out to be very interesting, of course, but not in any way or in ways that are extrapolatable from what less mature or more, let's say, more innocent and ignorant viewpoints hold it to be. What's going on here is extremely interesting, but to discover that, you have to approach it in its own terms. You have to learn to let go of holding it to be this or that and modeling it to be this or that, and approach it in a true condition of receptivity and find out what's actually here. And then you discover what's here is actually pretty cool and pretty amazing and pretty astounding, etc., etc., in the way that it is. And of course you discover that way. And progressively you come to appreciate and integrate with being with it in the way that it actually is more and more profoundly.
So in that transitional period, you just have to be curious and open, and I mean in that transitional period where all the stuff that you used to think you were living for just suddenly went kind of fuzzy and gray.
Yeah.
And you might for moments think, well, what's the point of living then?
Yeah.
Just hang in,
sure.
Keep watching, keep
well,
observing.
And historically in many traditions in spirituality, this kind of a condition is modeled as being a rebirth, and it's very much like that, because the world you thought you were in, you've been born out of that world into a new world, and you, in a sense, and you don't know what it is, and you have to discover what it is. You come to discover what it is. Just as when you're born into any world, it's like, well, here I am. Now what? and sure, there's a learning curve there. There's a period of at least embracing it as it is, and so on, moving into it to the degree of your capacity.
Thanks.
So don't quit your day job.
Well, it's actually irrelevant whether or not you quit your day job.
Yeah, sure, quit your day job.
Because again, just because all of these human activities and let's call them game structures, all these human game structures exist, doesn't mean that they're invalid. They're fine, but they just don't exist in the way that the people that are practicing them think they do. Everything is real. Nothing is unreal. Jobs are real. Money is real. It's all real, but it's not. It doesn't have the actual reality that the majority of people may hold it to be, but it exists in the way that it actually does. And so there's no reason to do or not do anything. Nothing is invalidated. But everything is what it actually is, not what you may be used to thinking it is.
Yeah. I see exactly what you're saying. Totally.
No, I was on my way over here, Peter. I was just stopped at the light, and then I don't know. Sometimes I just have the experience of, this is a very present. I mean, just seeing that no matter where I go, whatever I do, it's still just the same.
Yes.
That
Yes.
This is it.
Yes, this is
and
it.
any recognition I have anywhere else is this.
Yes.
And so, it's interesting how we kind of pin other things that we think we recognize onto the other things as opposed to the this.
Yeah.
When in fact it's sort of the other way around.
Yes, exactly so. Yeah. This is itself. It's always itself. It never departs from itself. But it can present as anything. So in other words, it always looks different. Mm-hmm. But all of these different views are of the same thing. And do not depart from the same thing. And the only message in anything is this. Exactly. What I say, which may be a little cumbersome or sound abstract, I say this never departs from itself. It never leaves itself. So this is this, and this is it. And, but what about this? No, it's not departing from itself. This is it. This is it.
I mean, you can travel world, and
Yeah.
you're still there at this.
Yeah, it will always look. It can look.
Not to devalue what that is.
It can look like anything, but it never departs from itself. It can look like anything, but it's always this. It's like a dream. You can dream of anything, but whatever you dream of is still just a dream. It never departs from dreaming. So it's a matter of not getting fixated upon particular apparitions or particular, formulae of flavors or chemistries or structures, but rather see that they are just examples of, or see what they are examples of, which of course is this.
Right.
And I believe in some schools of Buddhism, there's something that's referred to. It's usually translated as suchness, and this is a lot to this is about this exact thing. It's like not to you don't be with what any particular form or particular apparition. Be with the suchness that it is, the suchness that it intrinsically is.
And it's not like you have to look for that. That's evident if you look closely.
Yeah, exactly. It's evident. It's really a matter of just becoming sensitive to it by becoming less distracted by what it looks like and less fixated on less in the habit of drawing differences between things based on what they look like. Instead, see that they're basically all the same. And looking different is not a sign of. It's not actually a symptom of being different.
There's this whole idea of deciding, which you've talked about here and there, to do with being aware that you decide to look from that point of view. Is it possible to do that, or is it actually kind of hit and miss, or
Either. It's not impossible. I mean, it's really it's a kind of one way of dealing with what you're talking about is commitment. Really committing to, well, wait a minute. Why am I just flirting with this? This is for real. This is it. This is this. Why don't I get off my butt and quit pretending otherwise? Why do I, just refuse to let myself be seduced into all this insanity? And no, this is this. And sure, that's
which it is at the end of the day anyway.
Of course. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's a non-commitment because it's not like you're committing to anything that cannot be the case. It doesn't change anything. So in a certain sense, it's a trick, but in another sense, it's for real. In a certain phase in one's unfoldment, one can get to a place where one really knows all this stuff. I mean, very, very intimately and profoundly knows all this stuff, but still is kind of flirting with it and kind of floating with it. And at that point, this issue of commitment, or deciding, in Delusion they call it decide upon one thing. In other words, it's like, no, this get real. This is this. I see this. I know it. So why don't I live it? And I am living it. So why do I bother to pretend otherwise?
Right.
It's just a kind of a
like
cowboy up kind of a thing. Yeah. Walk the walk, walk the talk.
Yeah.
Step up to the plate. I mean, all these kinds of euphemisms.
Cliches.
Cliches. Yeah.
Metaphors. Analogies.
Man up.
Get man up. Get on the pony.
But it's not. But again, this is that kind of a thing is really only relevant when it becomes relevant for a person at their particular phase of unfoldment. At a certain point, it would not be relevant, and it would be kind of an aspiration that wouldn't really be doable. And if you're past that point, then it's irrelevant because.
Yeah. Well, and this is doing that anyway.
Yeah, of course.
So, in a sense, it's sort of a moot point.
Of course,
Yeah.
I mean, in the most profound sense, all of this is a moot point. Because this is, with absolute inevitability and with absolute irresistibility, is completely doing its process. And anything that we think of as our lives or reality or the universe or anything else is just that very process, which it is doing with absolute success, absolute completeness, no resistance. And so so all of this discussion is really all completely, essentially, beside the point, because the fact is, it's all happening. It can't not happen, and that's absolutely and most profoundly true. But nonetheless, all of these things we discuss and look at have their relevancy in the sense that they do, and are part and parcel of this process too. So.
I found that I can make the decision, and I have, in large part, I think, recognized all of this on sort of, I want to say it's sort of on a cognitive level. But there are times, I wouldn't say frequent, where there is this radical shift, and it's no longer cognitive. It's in my face, right here, right now. It's inescapable, and I have no control over it. I have nothing to do with it. It's just, and so for those brief periods of time, there's no elaborations, there's no categories, blah blah blah. Blah.
Sure.
And I don't know why it sort of happens, like when it does or how it does. I mean, I'm always just thunderstruck by it when it does. It might be happening more often, I'm not too sure. It's completely, mysterious about what this triggers. I tried to explain it, I think, to Lisa, and it's like when you're in the optometrist and they've got that thing on your face, and you're looking through the lenses, and they say, okay, is one better or two better? And when I go from 1 to 2, it's not just clear; it's completely different. It's just totally different.
Yeah.
And it's so shocking and stunning. But I just can't put words on it. But how or why it happens, I don't know. I mean, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I can see this on a almost certainly on an hour-to-hour basis. It's in my head. It's on my mind. It's noticing, trying to pay attention to it. But the shift is, I don't know, warp drive to Mars or something. I have no idea.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the symptoms of unfoldment include all of that. It includes, exploring it. It includes wondering about it. It includes studying it. It includes all sorts of direct revelation and just, experiential wow factor and all these kinds of things. And when it shows up very unstably and very dynamically and so on and so forth. And that's the nature of it. It is the way that it is, and continues to be so. It never stabilizes in terms of its apparition. It always has and always will. Like when I say always, I mean always. Wildly fluctuates in terms of what it seems to be, what it looks like. I mean, call it tidal fluctuations or something, but that's way too tame. Much more extreme sorts of thing. But that's the nature of this actuality. Is it's intrinsically completely unstable, completely unresolvable, completely dynamic, and again, it is that. It always has been, and always will be. And so as we come to it, we begin to notice this more and more, largely because we're not damping it down by the dullness of an imposed conceptual framework of what's going on. It's always been wildly fluctuating, but we may, with some seeming success, dampen that down with the superstructure of a worldview and a game structure and self-identities and life identities and all this kind of stuff that we hold in imagination. And as that is it no longer here, then this dynamism may become more immediately apparent. The incredible instability. I mean, it's very dreamlike in the sense, like in a dream. A dream can just all of a sudden to take a left turn and woo. So you should wait. There's no continuity. There's no continuity here. There's no continuity, except this itself. It never departs. It's always this. So that in that sense, it's absolutely continuous. But as the way it presents is absolutely discontinuous. Absolutely. That there seems to be any continuity at all is amazing. Yeah.
There's a question online. Lately I've been experiencing a sense of peace, space around my body when I contemplate this moment's existence. Can you comment about this? Have you experienced this? I also feel like my movements are more fluid, easier.
Sure. There's all kinds of ranges of ways of exploring or being with the energy of being yourself, and as one is in unfoldment, these ranges will morph and will develop and will move into seemingly new terrain as you become progressively more sensitive to noticing these things. In fact, they've always been like that. But again, we haven't noticed them as much when we're, fixated in our storyline. But as we become more nakedly aware of our actual being, our actual, call it functioning, as it is, then we begin to notice these other aspects of it. But don't fixate on anything as being desirable or good. Peace is not any better than non-peace. Peace is not.
Yes.
Why should I look at this box here?
Yeah, really.
Well, because there's somebody back there.
Somebody's in there? How do they fit him in there?
Go.
How do they fit him in there? Where are they?
Well, I'm just giving them all such a thrill.
Magic trick.
It's electricity. It's electricity.
Yes.
Oh, it's electricity. Oh, why didn't you say so?
There you go.
Peace is not
Just a
any better
dream.
than.
Yeah, you were saying peace is
Peace is not any better than.
Yeah, peace is not any better than stress or conflict. Continuity is not any better than discontinuity. Life is not any better than death. Health is not any better than sickness. It's just all this extreme ranges of ways that this can present itself, and nothing is actually gained or lost by what it happens to look like at the time. And the real glue of samsara, the glue of suffering, the glue of the pain of delusion, is exactly this: thinking that something is better than something else. Everything's an opportunity. That's the truth. And when you see that, you begin to welcome everything. No problem. I mean, pleasure is fine, but so is everything else. And even seeking pleasure is fine. But, reality is a rich smorgasbord, and it's all ultimately satisfying. A large part of unfoldment is an increase in sensitivity. The reality itself never changes. I mean, it doesn't change fundamentally what it is and how it is what it is. But one's capacity to notice how it actually is develops, seems to develop as one becomes more and more sensitive. And the mysterious process of spiritual unfoldment consists of an increase in sensitivity. And that's what increases in sensitivity. It's like peeling the layers of an onion, where there's sort of seeming revelation. You discover new things and new aspects and new facets of the way things work, and what your experience is like. And it's not that your experience is actually changing so much as because your sensitivity becomes more heightened, you're noticing more and more what has always been the case. And so we discovered these amazing, seemingly amazing aspects of this that it has always been, but we may perhaps been too dense to access or to notice or to appreciate.
I've been exploring the intersection between waking and sleeping,
Uh-huh.
and I'm making. Well, I mean, it seems to me I'm making contact with my unconscious, and when I'm aware of my unconscious, I have all I can describe is insights. But when I come back to full consciousness, I can't explain any of it.
No.
I can't articulate a single thing.
No.
It's like, it's just not translatable.
Yeah.
It's like a completely different language somehow or another.
It's fascinating because the unconscious mind can completely understand the conscious mind, but the conscious mind cannot approach the unconscious mind. So as you tune into the unconscious mind, you don't lose the conscious perspective, but you can't bring it back to the conscious perspective in its own terms and express it.
It's yeah, I'd come back and go, wow, but nothing.
What do you mean the unconscious mind would completely understand the conscious mind?
The unconscious mind is intrinsically nonlinear, and nonlinearity can handle linearity, because from nonlinearity's point of view, linearity is just a mode of nonlinearity. But linearity can't handle nonlinearity because linearity excludes anything other than linearity. Another way to put it is in terms of finite and infinite.
I'm sorry, what's an example of the unconscious mind completely understanding the conscious mind?
An example.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
An example of the unconscious mind. An example of the unconscious.
Otherwise, you're talking way.
Yeah. Well, it's not important. Well, it's not important. I don't know that. Again, I don't know that I can communicate it. Let me see what I can do here. Let me see if I can come up with something.
Maybe it doesn't matter.
Well, probably not. But let me see if I can come up with something. Maybe I can pull something out of my sleeve.
He needs a job. Did you say that?
Do you play music or do any arts like that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, if you play music, that's a good way to understand it. The conscious mind doesn't play music. The unconscious mind plays music. The conscious mind can describe aspects of the music, but the aspects of the music the conscious mind describes doesn't include the nonlinearity and textural and emotional involvement of the unconscious participation, which is what actually is playing the music. And yet, from the point of view of playing the music, you can easily be with the descriptions of the music. Mm-hmm. But from the point of view of the descriptions of the music, you can't include what actually playing it is like. I did it.
Yes, you did.
Very good.
That one's fresh because we were playing music today, and I'm not a musician, so he was trying to get me to do something, and why the conscious mind jumps in, and it's like all thumbs.
You can't play music from the point of view of conscious mind. It's like trying to drive from the point of view of the conscious mind. Anyone that drives from the point of view of their conscious mind, I don't want to be on the road.
Okay, question from George.
George.
Hi, George.
Hi, George.
When you
He's in there?
he's in there. Or she.
Stuffed him in before.
Okay. When you say this, are you referring to some palpable sense of existence, independent of the patterns perceived, Or is it just the patterns themselves as they appear in the instant?
All of the above. It's inclusive. It's everything. It is the patterns. It is, I don't remember exactly what you said, the essence of the patterns. It is beyond the patterns. It is the, it's the whole ball of wax. It's reality itself with a capital R and or a small r, as many such sizes and shapes of R's as you care to use. This is this. It's everything. It's reality itself. It's the universe. Life, the universe, and everything. If you're a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
George says hi. It's backing.
It's important to understand that there's only one thing here. There's only one thing here, and there's only one thing happening, and it's the universe, it's reality, it's God, it's you, it's the Atman, it's nature, it's whatever you want. But you are it is you, and it's inclusive. It absolutely includes. There's nothing that it is not. There's nothing. It's not. This is everything but that over there. There's no but that over there. It's just everything. Everything and anything that you could possibly designate is just an aspect of this, and so much more. Things you can't even designate are still aspects of this.
Like I'm having an especially visual night tonight, Peter, where I'm thinking of, taking one giant step and having your whole world move with you.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah, well, it does.
Yeah.
Sure. And it includes what it looks like, it includes the patterns, it includes, a sense of being, it includes all that. None of that is excluded, but all of that is just, we verbally we might say aspects of this, but this has no aspects. They are all this itself. And none of those are what the words describing them make them suggest that they are. Although many people may not realize it, one of the best human words for this, that pretty inclusively indicates and comprehensively includes what it is the word experience. This is experience. Experience is what is here. You can't find anything outside experience. And anything and everything you can think about or talk about or point at or write about or anything is going to be something within experience. Unless you're imagining it, and even if you're imagining it within experience. So.
Peter, when you talk about engagement, is it engagement in seeing-ness or the dream, or what is the...
Doesn't matter. It's all the same. There's nothing but engagement. Experience is engagement. And it can seem to be in many different ways and with many different flavors and on many different levels, but it's actually always the same. It just can look incredibly different. But there's no fundamental difference between different modes or styles or quantities of engagement. All engagement is engagement. All engagement is noticing. All engagement is experience. All engagement is apparition of form in consciousness, patterns in consciousness. All engagement is radiant presence. and it can look like delusion, it can look like dreams, it can look like confusion, it can look like naked revelation, it can look like anything, but it's all ultimately exactly the same. As sensitivity develops and unfoldment progresses, one discovers that even delusion and confusion is, in fact, radiant presence and always has been, and it's no longer a problem. And it's no longer even something you try to avoid. You don't need to not be an idiot. You don't need to not be a deluded fool. On the contrary, you discover that you irrevocably are, even as you are transcendental reality itself. And this is not a problem at all. It's just something. It's just a amusing fact. Whereas at certain points in the process of unfoldment, there's a real struggle to get away from delusion and towards seeing clearly, and that's appropriate in those phases because it's a kind of again, like we were talking about earlier, it's a practice. It's a matter of experiment. It's not ultimately important. It's not ultimately good. But it can be provisionally good as an experiment to cast perspective on, where you've been coming from, on a confused frame of mind. And so you move from confusion into clarity, and then you discover when you finally get to clarity that confusion came right along. Confusion is actually just an aspect of clarity. And then also all of a sudden you see with absolute clarity that confusion is not a problem. Because confusion is clarity. Confusion is radiant presence. So no longer is something you need to avoid. But to know that with certainty, you have to get to clarity. And to get to clarity, it may be pragmatic to be discriminating at certain phases.
And confusion, at times seems to be an absolutely necessary part of the whole.
Well, it is. It is. In a profound sense, reality is pure confusion. But that it is so is so with absolute clarity. So clarity and confusion aren't opposites. They're one and the same thing.
Goes back to the experience, the sort of subjectivity of it all.
Sure. Yeah.
So would confusion be a pattern that's learned, or it's an
No.
inherent expression of?
Confusion is inherent, but it's again it's not important to philosophize or to figure out how things work and where they come from and where they go. The main thing is, pragmatically speaking, when you find yourself in delusion and confusion, then you can discover clarity, you can discover noticing. And as you go further and further into clarity and further into noticing, you will discover retroactively from that perspective what confusion is, which will solve the problem of confusion, not by eliminating it, but by revealing that it isn't actually a problem.
Yes.
But you have to go through that cycle to have that certainty, to have that clarity.
Confusion and delusion and even clarity are actually just labels.
Yes, exactly so.
Nothing else.
Exactly so. Exactly. The labels are the same thing.
But it's still a radiant presence. Right?
Yes, exactly.
It's always, there's nothing else.
That's what we got.
You just find out you're a perfect idiot.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good one.
The Sufis had it right.
Perfect. A perfect idiot. An all-knowing perfect idiot.
Allahu Akbar.
There must also be levels of noticing, because I know in my experience now, I can't say that it's going real deep, but I'm just noticing everything now, just like a little kid, who's just, everything's interesting.
Well, there's a seeming development of ever increasing sensitivity in unfoldment, which looks as if it's levels of noticing that will develop. But in actual fact, again, it's all very paradoxical, because what you are discovering is what has always been the case, and you're just more becoming. It's a matter of becoming sensitive to what is the case, rather than moving to a superior level of noticing. It's more appreciating. It's more developing opening to the ability to appreciate noticing in a finer way. Yeah. But again, making sense of it isn't important. Just doing it is what matters. And any noticing is ultimately powerful, and it spontaneously unfolds itself. It spontaneously, comes along with or is a development of increasing sensitivity and increasing appreciation of what this astounding condition is that is here, which appreciation is, what they call realization, ultimately.
Anytime you put a label on noticing, it's like a step backwards.
Sure, yeah. No label is accurate. No label is true. None. They're all useless. They're all gobbledygook.
Well, that seems noticing without labeling would mean that you're not noticing. Because if you notice with a label, I mean, how can you notice without labeling?
Noticing is always without labeling. Noticing, my definition of noticing is being with experience outside the context of interpretation. And in labeling, it is essentially synonymous with interpretation. So saying, this is a cup is interpretation. I'm the experience, the direct experience is here, but there's also an interpretation. If it's just there's no cup, this doesn't go. The cup isn't there anymore, but this hasn't gone away, and that's one example of what noticing consists of. But even labeling is very subtle, because labeling isn't really labeling. From the conscious point of view, we were talking about the conscious mind and unconscious mind. From the conscious mind point of view, labeling is labeling and not labeling is not labeling. From the unconscious point of view, labeling isn't really labeling. Labeling is transcendental radiant presence. So it's all very slippery and tricky. That's why we can have all of these discussions here and have it all be complete bullshit, but have it not be a waste of time. In a simple sense.
What is time?
Don't start.
Don't you second start.
We've been there.
Just don't want to do it. Don't do it. Don't go there, dude.
It seems like somebody could hear what you just said and think that if they were noticing that and the word cup floated into their head, they'd done something wrong.
It's not as simple as that. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of being with experience outside, beyond the context of labeling, whether or not labeling is actually present.
The label's still going to happen.
Yeah, it's a matter of noticing that there is direct experience, and that labeling is just labeling. I mean, essentially, you could say there are two different events, in the sense that vision is one event and thought's another event, let's say. Although, again, it's not that simple. But it's a matter of discovering that direct experience is always present, whether or not you're calling it something. And the direct experience is actually not actually affected or conditioned in reality by what you're calling it. And that's the power of noticing, is you get, because in ignorance, the problem is that the interpretive narration is being confused with the direct experience. from the ignorant point of view, this is a cup. It can't not be a cup. You can't see it and have it not be a cup. Whereas in actuality, that it's a cup is, the idea that it's a cup is a fairly small part of my experience, and there's a vast other portion of the experience which is directly experiencing this, which is entirely outside the realm of whether or not it's a cup. My hand is with the cup in the same way as it's with the table, and it doesn't know a table's a table, doesn't know a cup's a cup. So what's my hand seeing? My hand's not seeing a cup, and that becomes very interesting. What the light doesn't know that it's a cup, the light doesn't know it's a table, Just like I could say this is red, this is tan, but my hand doesn't know this is red. My hand doesn't know this is tan. My ears don't know this is tan. My ears don't know this is red. So in other words, you're tuning into what you're actually experiencing, and noticing that the narrative interpretation, the conceptual interpretation of what that consists of, is as a fairly small event or subsystem, let's say, within a much vaster system of direct experience. And the quality of direct experience is exactly what it is, irrespective of what the interpretive narrative is throwing at it, or is holding it to be.
And everything is noticing, there's no wrong noticing.
Absolutely, of course. Noticing is a euphemism for experience. We'll be taking a break in about 3 minutes, and then I'll look at the room. Oh well, I miss you.
Pink.
Yeah.
Turn around, you lazy boy.
Pretty.
You're so bad. It's beautiful sunset.
It's beautiful sunset. So what?
Oh man.
What are we, chocolate room?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're a beautiful sunset.
Yeah, we have our own beautiful sunset in here.
Oh,
Just this.
I'm noticing, for me, seems to have this inherent in it, this quality of letting go, of something releasing,
Yeah.
disappearing in a way. So.
The way I put that, or the way I would phrase, hold that to be, is when you're with direct experience outside the context of an interpretation, or an interpretive framework, you're essentially letting go of the interpretive framework when discovers the intrinsic quality of direct experience, which is inherently open, is inherently, has a vast dynamism and freedom and spaciousness, to arbitrarily qualify it, that might not be so readily appreciable from within the context of the constriction of an interpretive framework.
Well, I know for a long time the habit of wanting to claim something or know it, in quotes,
Right.
Was operating so there'd be direct experience, but then a kind of clamping down on it.
Yeah.
And but more and more, there's just this almost simultaneous not doing that.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And it has a very different feeling tone experientially.
It's starting to.
It feels like a release. It feels like an opening. It feels like, up. I don't know, all these different ways you could try and put it, but of course you can't capture it.
You can take advantage of the fact of the openness.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm describing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has a very different feeling tone.
Nature of the openness.
Yeah, it has a very different feeling tone in terms of what this is, what one is, what life is, and rather than living a constricted, narrow life crawling through metaphorical caves, one discovers vastness and light and freedom and nourishment and liveliness and so on and so forth, with nothing having actually changed so much as having a facility to appreciate what things actually are, intrinsically free of all of this interpretive constraint we're used to imposing upon it in our imagination. I mean, the real fascinating thing here, in one sense, is the incredible power of imagination. Because essentially delusion, in the spiritual sense, ignorance in the spiritual sense, is entirely turned out by the imagination. And yet it's so real, it's so oppressive, it's so limiting, it's so, effective. And, discovering freedom from that, extricating oneself from that constraint is correspondingly so wonderful. And it's just simply a matter of being with imagination in various modes, in different ways.
I have to say, reading scientific journals, that just becomes more and more evident the longer that you've been into it. I mean, they end up defining reality in order to find data, and then they use data to prove the reality.
Yeah, sure. It's all circular.
It's completely circular. And at the end of the day, what I finally came to is that it's not so much about the science. It's really sort of a telling of, as you say, the imagination of consensus and these researchers to create reality almost, not almost, but completely out of nothing. And then there it is. It's absolutely real.
Sure.
And then we go out and we test it. I mean, it's sort of like insanity. Yeah, it's a kind of insanity. And
it's a carnival.
Well, it's it's a business.
It is. It's big business. Bottom line.
Yeah. Well, it's what it's people's lives and it's what they do. And
well, we're going to take a little break now, so we'll be back. Of course, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. I'll leave the video on, so feel free to enjoy our revelry if you're so inclined.
Is that right?
Really?
Is
We're
that
back in about 10 or 12 minutes.
With a guy as to why the dog is being I mean, the whole thing is weird because it's like you're thinking like the place where we can get maybe
That's true.
I would love to see.
Yeah,
I would have loved to have seen that.
Did you know the name?
Going outside.
You just Google
I wrote
Ted.
like
No, I know Ted.
No,
Like,
just a
Google
presence
Ted
replaced.
Band.
yeah.
You'll get the video.
I'll do
Yeah,
that.
totally.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, because they don't ban many TED Talks.
I want to see that.
There's a TED Talk that was banned?
Yeah, about this exact, it's about
Really?
science and about
Who banned it?
TED.
Ted had to.
Bad Ted.
Yeah, we thought you were on our side.
Hi George, hi Peter, hi Pam. Anybody else who's out there? Break time. Go get a tea. Wow, that's a really wide view you have there. Look at that.
I know, I can go.
How many people online?
Oh, Rona's there too. Hi Rona. I don't know how many people are online. I just have the Apple, the iPad.
Is
So
Jeff there?
I don't know if Jeff is there. Jeff, you there? Hey Jeff. Beth? Beth is probably on the cooking channel. Peter's waving. Woo! Rona, George, Peter. Pam was there, but I don't know if she's still there. She hasn't said anything in a while, so.
Jeff staying with you?
In other words, conscious thought isn't really conscious thought. Conscious thought is
Can't be more
transcendental energy.
Conscious.
Yeah, he's making arrangements. I'm going to take a peek at the sunset.
But it actually,
See you guys later.
Is he coming? Is Jeff coming?
So when I hear
The light at the sunset.
I assume so, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. This has been incredible.
what it is,
But I'm trying to talk to him coming in about a month.
transcend anyway.
Really?
In other words,
Oh, wonderful.
however, it's something
Where are you going?
North Carolina.
See you, Mom.
Dave's mom.
So even that applies even to thought itself,
Good.
to logic itself, even to semantics itself. Semantics is actually completely
They've been
irrational
here for a month, so.
beyond semantics.
We had no life for a month.
Yeah, really. A month. That's a.
That's
But
why
they're moving to Santa Barbara.
science can
Which
be
is really great,
productive.
because the other option
Science
would have been to
systems
move
and
the
rockets to
house.
the moon.
That would be really.
How did they get
was
this?
nice.
The fact that it's all
Okay,
fantasy.
that's great. How did they get that
Not
picture
just
of the mountain
fantasy.
line? That was an amazing shot.
Scientists
I
are
don't know, I'm
doing
just
more
kind of a bat bucket.
than
Was
they
it lockdown?
They love that.
It was how can you move in and put rays?
because they
And
are, of
there's
course,
just this
direct.
gully sort of creek next to the trail.
Ultimately, not an
People were standing there looking down and
explicitly transcending.
even the bobcat or something else, they killed a deer, and the deer was kind of lying next to the creek, and the bobcat
Kind of bombs and
flying
flying.
along, crossing it, sort of guarding the deer.
Is it gonna rain?
The loss of the
I'm sure nobody took the deer. Yeah, so.
And bobcats chase you if they're
That's a
aggressive.
good sign.
They're pretty small.
They're not that big, I think they might have been.
And if you corner them, you should imagine it.
I don't know, but this one was just.
Three blocks away and down.
So scientists can't acknowledge what's really going on,
Any signs of
even
it?
as they are being and doing what's
I wonder if online you see was a door open. No, they can't.
It's like not letting the left hand know what
Not
the
too
right
many,
hand
though.
does.
Really? You want to get rid of some? Yeah, probably, I don't know. People don't use them. They're just for decoration.
Oh, you mean you got too many pillows?
Oh, you got the whole pillow there too? No, you don't ever use them. I think I only need two. You need them all, they're pretty.
No, it seems like never.
Those in the back burner.
You gotta keep them around just for
We're
decoration.
always doing, we always have
How
a
about
fun.
too many, Joshua
Put a
trees?
couple on your
Where do you buy
bed.
those shirts?
Oh, my bed?
I had a name.
Made in
Yeah, I picked out the cloth.
Little decorative
The guy
pillows during the day.
Don't you
You guys have something really like that, it's so hot.
Back
Bricks
problems.
and brothers and or you use cushions.
I had made another one too, I had two. Doesn't feel it, it's like really soft.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's certainly true. I've been looking for something like that, I'll take walks, something light,
Yeah, right, light is the
and
key,
a little bit of, air room and stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly
Maybe
right.
better for Tony, we're not, doesn't look like that at all.
It's so sad when it's old, you know,
And maybe we're going
looking like that.
Hey, 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 anybody home? Hey, Jeff, you there?
Yeah. The non-gluten. I mean, the gluten, non-gluten, yeah. Which one? Oh, it's
I'm thinking it's like a real thing. Lately I've been thinking.
House.
Yeah.
I'm not doing very much, but
I ain't putting it up like, oh,
we
man.
just got to finish all the framing and then we have to cork it, paint it,
Going next weekend?
and the baseboards.
Yeah, I'm,
Baseboards are all done.
Just need to clock and paint on that.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I've got a couple of, I've got a sliding door in the closet that I'm just going to start tomorrow. Surround there's a couple of windows that go. I've still got 4 windows that I have to surround. And then we're going to start on the desk.
What did you told me, but I forgot.
I'm going to take the old one down and put a new one up that's 4 foot longer. With redwood. Right now it's plywood with carpet.
oh, yeah, everything's still there.
And no pressure treatment.
The beams part of the house, or they just,
No, that's it.
are they open?
Yeah, she was selling.
Yeah, but they're not pressure treated. They're going to go up to the rain. It's planking. So we're going to take all it. It's where the wood meets wood. That's where and the rest of it's pressure treated. The string is
Because in those days, I didn't have pressure treated the same way they do now.
With the posts, not pressure treated.
We use regular posts. So yes, treated. Because posts, you can see regular kind of reinforced the string. So we go into the first. So the decking and the post were so they make contact with the top of the chair, whatever you were using. That point would be redwood, which is good.
I was going to use redwood stringers and just have a lot.
Well, you can, yeah. I mean, the trouble with the white wood is very so as long as you use the red,
I was going to pressure treat. But I was going to buy pressure treat on board and do everything up to the floor. The floor itself is going to be pressure treated. So you say
well, redwood is famous
for being, it doesn't leak.
I mean, basically, it won't rot. In some cases, it would if it was just like totally soft. But there's spots in San Francisco right this moment where they're still sitting on a redwood sill on the ground.
So we've got right now untreated fur as our posts and beams and trees.
What time did you leave there?
So we have
well, there's just ways to go. One thing you could do is just get little regular, what is it, 4x4 posts? So get some, spend some money and get some really good hard redwood, all red, no white. The white is the cambium layer, and it doesn't have the same tannins in it. That's why it's not real. It hits the tannins over time. That the tannins are what prevent it from rotting. So just get some redwood 2x4s and cut them up into little 4-inch squares, right? And you just put that right under the post. Just nail them onto the bottom of the post. And that's what's in the contact point.
Well, I was going to put them on concrete blocks.
Yeah, but where the 4x4 hits the concrete, make a redwood shim, make a redwood block. Which will basically prevent.
I can just buy 4x4s and cut slices.
Cut little hot slices, see? Yeah, 2x4. Well, no, you want to use a 2x4 because a 4x4 thin will be very brittle. You just break it with your hand.
Did you buy it?
So get 2x4, because now you're cutting it into roughly a 4-inch square, right? And then a 2x4, you cut it on the you just take a 2x4, you just cut a piece off here, a piece off like that. That's very strong. And then you just put it down and just nail it onto the bottom of the
Because right now we've got is 4x4 sitting on a redwood.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, most of the you're just saying concrete here, that already have a wooden
with a metal tie.
Any place where a 4x4 is going to be steel, metal, concrete, granite, just doing what I'm saying.
And that's better than pressure treated?
I mean, pressure treated. If you cut through pressure treated for whatever, redwoods. Pressure treated.
But if I'm going to do that, I have to take the deck apart anyhow, right?
Well, I was assuming you're going to take it off.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I was going to start again with new wood. Do you think I don't need that?
Carl's okay.
Well, you're going to extend it, though.
Anyway, that's how
Yeah.
Is that with us?
What's that?
You're not going to see.
I was
There, how do we know
beams and then strings on top of that. Well, that's what I was going to build.
Wait, here, well,
I mean, we're already joking this thing.
12 feet. There was only 3 others.
But it's nothing, it's all going to be on here. It's nothing fancy.
couple ways to go. I mean, you could just use
Good.
2 by
They're all the same.
12 feet, probably go 2 by 8. Which is fine. You
You
know,
know, and you just
2 by
got
6 is
funded
probably
today.
good.
Yeah, because I can just
Sorry, I didn't realize that I was being watched here.
grill salmon out there and then.
Maybe one, towards out towards the end. You know, or whatever we stand,
And I can maybe I'll learn how to grill fish.
so you need a beam.
I want those sticks.
So you only need piers out there with a beam.
That's good too.
Jackery.
We can do artistic. I hope it still has good flavors
Can
in
you
terms
put a ledger board on the hard again?
We can, we don't have to, but we can. Nobody's got it up.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be a 3-stranded extension.
What is that stuff?
Oh my. We're just giving them a sci-fi.
I was figuring of putting it in a row. 2 by 8 or something.
Well,
It helps you lose weight.
migrating back into that.
Stop my answer.
Tie that.
I'll research it.
And then you, so then you just need stringers. Now those could be for as much.
We will be. We can be back anytime if people want to regather.
If you want to return, we'll restart.
You have the redwood right on top of the hook.
Hi Lily, hi Aaron. That's from Peter.
Peter who? Got air all over.
Peter Starkey.
Even between the
Oh, he was just watching. He got the whole
And
he got the whole
Peter Starkey says hi Leif.
Hey.
And let's see. And Rona says that so nice to walk out and pick a variety of veggies and herbs. Or herbs, depending on if she's in Canada.
Herbs.
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 It's very British.
Yeah.
Herbs.
Oh, herbs. Whoever invented silent H's anyway?
What's even up with that?
Okay,
Everyone knows
whoever
H is a
invented
hot
silent
sound.
K, okay? Knight in shining armor? I ask you.
Isn't it the British? They
Nice.
might drop all our H's.
No, it's the Americans.
No, like all the
Herbs.
coffee.
The limeys. I think we're limeys.
Let's start on spelling, okay?
Well, shall we resume?
Yes?
Zoom.
Zoom.
Okay.
Good try.
Told Amy was worried it was too strong.
It's hard. It's good. Here, this one is having a little.
Say a little bit more about continuity and patterning.
Yes.
Earlier you were saying there's no continuity.
Yes. Continuity and patterning are absolutely fascinating phenomena. And the way that one experiences continuity and patterning delineates really well the difference between delusion and realization. The nature of reality is that it presents itself with an infinite degree of patterning. Let's call it apparent patterning. And yet all the patterning is actually unpatterned because it's unresolvable. Let's say, and unresolved. And continuity is the apparent continuity of the apparent patterns. And again, the apparent patterns are apparently have apparent continuity to the extent they're apparent patterns. But when you discover that the apparent patterning is actually unpatterned, you also discover that the apparent continuity is actually not continuity. Through infinity, through essentially call it too much information. You cannot, even though experience presents itself with an arbitrary degree of specificity. There's as much specificity as you care to find. In any field of experience, you're quite in real time. You're quite obviously and actually experiencing all the detail that you're experiencing, exactly as it is, very, very specifically. And yet, if you look at any of or all of the specificity precisely, you can't resolve any of it into what it exactly is. And this unexactness is an aspect of its infinite nature. It's very analogous in mathematics, where you can't say exactly what pi is. The ratio, pi is the ratio of how long the circumference of a circle is in relation to its diameter. And it's exactly what it is, but you can't say exactly what it is, because as soon as you try and delineate it, you get into well, it's a little more than that, no, a little less than that, no, a little more than that, no, a little less than that, and you can just do that for the rest of time, and you still will never get to pi, even though it is exactly what it is. There's a circumference sitting there, and there's the diameter sitting there, or at least there would be if they were. Of course, that's another story. I don't know that I answered that very well. Let me take another approach. Continuity and patterning. I mean, patterning. This is really the prime issue about objectivity and about delusion. The idea that patterns are resolvable, that patterns are coherent and have some degree of continuity and are what they are, is the evidence, or is the assumption on which the evidence of the existence of objects and entities is based. So I can say that chair is that chair because it kind of looks basically the same from moment to moment, and if I left outside the door and walked back in, it would still be there more or less. If someone hadn't moved it, and still be looking more or less the same. Which is true, and that's the argument for the objective existence of that chair. But on the other hand, more or less the same is a euphemism for completely different. The actual experience of the chair is never repeating and always completely different than any previous instance. And it's also unresolvable in the sense that I cannot know exactly what I'm experiencing even in the instant. I can't, even though I am experiencing it, I cannot precisely determine in any sense exactly what it is I'm experiencing. So even as it is exactly what it is, it's essentially a question mark, and it's a question mark which is unique in that instant, and then it's gone, essentially replaced by or morphing into a different question mark, again morphing and again morphing forever. So experientially, that chair is a completely non-repeating, unresolvable experience of an apparent pattern. Since it's unresolvable, I can only say apparent pattern because I can't say what the pattern actually is because I can't resolve it.
Well, when you say resolve, it sounds like you're knowing it in relation to something else.
No.
Well, what do you mean by resolve?
Resolve it in any sense.
Because it's only what it is in terms of what it is.
Exactly. It is what it is in terms of what it is.
Yeah.
When you're trying to resolve it, you're trying to put a label on it.
No, I don't mean that. Maybe resolve isn't a good way to put it.
Well, if you're trying to define it,
Complete.
Not define it. Find an entirety there. Find a coherent entirety.
if you're aware that it's the entirety.
Yeah, and that entirety is an infinite field.
Yeah.
It's an infinite field.
Yeah, then it is entirely an infinite field.
But once you try and
let's just stop there. So it's an infinite field. So what is it?
It's an infinite field.
Yeah, it's an infinite field. This is an infinite field. How is this different than that? Is there a this? Is there a that?
No.
Exactly. No. And so in that instance, you've done away with this is a pattern versus that is a pattern. You've essentially decimated patterning, which is the point. When you discover that everything and anything, and every portion of anything and everything is an infinite field, then everything basically becomes the same thing, even though it looks different.
What I was trying to say was any time that you move away from infinite field, you're putting a label on something.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and that's what we're talking about.
That's why it doesn't work.
Right. Your husband summed it up rather succinctly.
It's like the yes, but.
Which yes, but? Which is the yes and which is the but?
Yeah. I mean, that may be true. But I mean, everything is an infinite field.
Yes.
And yet within that, there do seem to be apparent similar.
Yeah. Right, all of that. But the operative word there's apparent. It appears to be that. It seems to be that. It kind of implies that it's that, but it isn't.
It isn't. But it is. But in fact, not everything is the same.
Yeah, everything's the same.
The same potential of being what it is.
No, exactly the same. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Suppose last night you dreamed about a person you were talking to, and suppose you dreamed about a house you were in. Okay? The person that you dreamed about and the house you dreamed you were in are exactly the same thing. They looked different, but they were exactly the same thing. They were just dream. There was no person there, there was no house there. It appeared as if there was a person there. It appeared as if there was a house there, but all that was there was dream. Nothing else whatsoever. Strange, but true. And exactly the same strange but true condition exists right here. It looks as if there's a room, it looks as if there's people, it appears that we're having a conversation, it appears that time is passing, it appears that there's space. And guess what? Guess what?
Infinite field.
Infinite field. And that it appears that way is no end of strange. But there you go. No end of strange is what we got here.
But it also doesn't mean that there is no talking and there isn't.
No, there is talking in here, but talking in here is just words for infinity.
That's right.
It's a way of parsing reality.
Which is a way of parsing reality.
Talking.
Discussing patterning.
Sure, absolutely.
Thinking about our coming to.
Yeah, but discussing patterning does not discuss reality.
Well, it's
I can talk about waves and ocean chemistry, and I'm not talking about the ocean. I'm talking about abstractions which I'm asserting to be of the ocean.
Right.
And the abstractions of the ocean are not the ocean.
No, they're not. Nothing
Right.
is other than what is.
Yeah, exactly. And what is an infinite field. You can't get beyond it. So high you can't go over it, so low you can't go under it, so wide you can't go around it, you got to go into the door.
Otherwise known as radiant presence.
This is something that is known.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's not necessarily seen.
Which is not necessarily seen.
Experience
Yeah.
of infinity.
Right.
Infinity is experienced as a specifically.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't experience infinity.
Absolutely. Infinity is absolutely specific. Infinity is specifically infinity. And this is it. This is specifically infinity right here. Very, very specifically, very precisely, very objectively, very actually. This is it.
That's all.
And this is what it happens to look like.
And it's differing. Infinity.
Infinity is infinitely different than itself.
Yes.
That's one of its very strange properties. It's infinitely different than itself without being other than itself. Very strange. You start dealing with infinity, and then you have this, and you can have that, and that's different than this, and this is different than that. And infinity is just not like that. And infinities, this infinity and that infinity are the same infinity. And that makes absolutely no sense, but there you go. Infinity is not about sense, infinity is about actuality. Infinity is completely irrational. Otherness and sameness are synonyms in infinity.
Infinity seems to be experienced through pattern.
Sure.
And
that's what we're able to notice. That we're able to notice the patterns. But that's not to say that there aren't.
But patterning always exists in the context of unpatterning.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean specifically. I don't mean abstractly unpatterning. I don't mean some idea of unpatterning. I mean the fact that all patterns are fuzzy. No pattern has sharp edge. No pattern is. Every pattern is specifically itself, but they're all fuzzy edge. None of them have like absolutely sharply delineated edges. I mean, again, it's slightly metaphorical, but experientially. Like, let's say, here's my body, right? You're seeing my body, it's appearing in your field of experience, however it is in your field of vision, and so on, right? Exactly what shape is it? And I don't mean to describe it, it's undescribable, but even finding exactly what shape it is. Where exactly does my finger end? Where exactly does it end? It's fuzzy, everything's fuzzy. Everything is experientially fuzzy. Experience is intrinsically fuzzy, it's unresolvable. It's vibrating, it's moving, it's pulsating, and it's unresolvable. I mean, physicists run into that. I mean, you talk about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and it sounds very abstract and scientific and mathematical and stuff, but it's just plain experiential. All they're saying is things are fuzzy. You can do it macro. It's very, very simple. Here, watch. My finger's moving. Exactly where is my finger at any given moment? You can't say, because no matter how, even my finger's moving as slow it is, no matter, if you took a picture of my finger moving, no matter how fast your shutter speed was, my finger would always be blurry. At a certain point, you might claim that it's the blurriness stop, but in actuality, if you look closer, it would be blurry. Or you can pan and follow my finger so it's not blurry, but then the background is going to be blurry. You cannot get my finger to be in one place and the background to be in one place. You can't. Think about it. I mean, and this is not just sophistry. And look at it closely. This is the macrocosmic objective actuality that Zeno's paradox was indicating. You know Zeno's paradox? This indicates that same thing. Movement illustrates movement is impossible. Because location is impossible, and that proves there is no space and there is no time. And yet here's my hand moving. So what is this hand moving? The hand is moving because of infinity, because in a logical and a structural universe it can't possibly happen. I realize you have to follow that to see what I'm saying, but if you do follow it, you will see what I'm saying. Yes, it's a paradox. It's an actual paradox. It's a for real paradox. My hand is really here, it's really moving. Where is it? Where is my finger at any moment? It's not anywhere in particular. And if you know exactly where my finger is, then you can't tell where the room is.
Where's the universe?
That's Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, macro scale. That's without electron microscopes and all this other stuff. It's not just sophistry. It's not just tricks with words. Look at it. Look at the experience of it. And this gets down to very precisely the fact that patterning is unresolvable. Patterning is apparent. It appears to be the way it is, but you cannot, in the sense that you can't resolve exactly where my finger is. It can't be done. Because it's not any particular place. It's moving.
But Actually, that depends on the worldview.
Which depends on the worldview.
Where my finger is not anywhere in relation to the background, but it is always attached to my hand.
Sure.
So my finger is always attached to my hand. So I can say that categorically.
Sure. But you haven't said anything because the finger is the hand, and the hand is the finger.
Okay, well then my hand is attached to my wrist. Or
Yeah.
whatever, you know.
Yeah. And the wrist is moving, and my body's moving, and you can't say where any of it is, which proves that the whole pattern is unresolvable.
My whole thing is that it's just a way of looking at it. There's always a way to look at anything which seems to define it.
Right. But what it is...
But it doesn't.
Right, but it is what it is in itself. Experientially, it transcends the ways you're defining it. And what I'm talking about is what it is experientially. What it is experientially is infinite. And I'm trying to demonstrate that fact using finite words, which is a bit of a challenge. But this whole issue of apparent patterning and apparent continuity is really of the essence. If things were unpatterned, if reality just looked like totally chaotic snow always, and it always had, all this delusion about bodies and space and time and birth and death and karma would be irrelevant, right? Because there'd be nothing for you to even churn out that narrative and raise those questions about. There'd be no bodies, there'd be no history, there'd be just forever. And the point is, it actually is like that. It just doesn't look like that if you don't look closely enough.
So not looking closely is patterning.
Not looking closely creates the illusion of actual patterning, as opposed to the patterning which exists, which is actual unpatterning. Apparent patterning is actual unpatterning. Apparent patterning that's taken to be actual patterning is the nature of delusion.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that there isn't any delusion.
Right. Well, of course, in reality there isn't, sure.
Well, in reality, right here.
Yeah.
Point there.
Sure.
So, not looking closely is just a kind of quality of this.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not like there's a more closely to look at. It's just whatever is.
Well, but not looking closely is itself a very slippery thing, because not looking closely is not what it seems to be. I mean, not looking closely is one of reality's modes for sure, and not noticing that actual patterns are actually unpatterned is one of reality's modes.
Right.
And the way in which that works is completely mysterious and transcendental.
But it is
In the fact that all patterns are actually unpatterned, how can patterns appear to be actually patterned? Can't answer that question. You know, it's through misinterpretation. It's through which is not looking at the evidence closely. It's like how can a fanatic assert that patently absurd things are true? Because they haven't examined the evidence closely that their assertions are based on, that would reveal the fact that they're patently, like someone who's just saying the earth is flat. Okay, well, given that the earth is flat, how do you explain X, Y, and Z phenomena that are measurable and observable?
Well, and
how do you explain planes flying around the earth? How do you explain the satellite views of the earth? How do you explain geosync satellites and blah, blah, blah? It's like, okay, you've got to really do some fancy footwork to come up with explanations given that. Or you just say, oh no, you just write denial. No, that's all just not true. It's flat. Which is not looking at the evidence. And so the evidence is plain to see that all patterns, all apparent patterns are actually unpatterned. But it's possible to not look. And just claim that, no, they're patterned. The patterns are here and they're stable. You know? But if you look and see, they are. Oh no, they are. Well, okay, like you can do that.
And yet that's an experience.
It's not quite what I'm trying to say.
No, I'm not saying that's what you're trying to say. That's your problem.
It seems to me that there's a freedom that is inherent in patterning or not looking closely. Not looking closely is just looking in a way.
Sure.
And forget about the evidence for a minute, because it's in essence we don't have evidence for anything.
Right.
You know, in any linear way.
Right. And that we don't have evidence. We say we don't have any evidence for anything. It's not a negative condition. It's a positive condition.
Fine with me.
Well, there's no evidence. We have no evidence.
Yeah. I'm just saying that it feels to me like there's this deep balance going on. You know, anything you say is true in a way because there's this deep balance related to it. It's like you could say something is unpatterned. Okay. Well, that's because there is in balance with that pattern. How can I say it differently? Infinity is not going to have any place in which opposites can live. You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, or another way to put that is infinity can easily handle any opposites, but not as opposites.
Yeah,
opposites turn out not to be opposites in the context of infinity.
Exactly.
Right.
So anything that you like seeing this is the experience of it is however you're seeing it, however that experience is with all that it isn't, so to speak.
Right.
100% or infinity percent.
Sure. From the point of view of infinity, that's fine. But how do you deal with ignorance? Yeah. I mean, this is the conundrum.
Well,
someone that says, "What infinity? What are you talking about, infinity? Here we got rooms and chairs and people and what infinity? What do you do? I mean, how do you That's what I'm looking at."
Yeah. Well, if somebody's not interested in having a discussion about it, I suppose there wouldn't be much to say.
Yeah.
Unless someone asks a question.
Yeah, and then throws the wrench in the works.
But it feels to me like there's a kind of beauty to ignorance, so to speak.
Sure, ignorance is bliss.
It's beautiful. It's like what you described it before. You say like a little child. You don't expect a little child to have the mind of an adult. Or
sure.
That kind of maturity.
Oh, absolutely. Sure, it's fine.
So there's that's the kind of thing how can I say it? There's an inherent balance in everything in that way. The child is 100%.
Sure.
It's perfect.
Sure. No, I'm not talking about value judgment or qualitativeness. Ignorance is fine, but when someone is grappling with unfoldment and knowing that there must be more, but fighting their way to it, and grappling with patterning as seeming to be, actual and an impenetrable wall that is somehow blocking them or containing them or limiting their world. My answer to that would be to point out in various ways, in various guises, that in actuality, openness, emptiness, infinity, are actually experienceable actualities, and in the context of that experiential actuality, all of these impenetrable, containing, limiting patterns reveal themselves to be not containing and not limited and not oppressive at all. But to see that, one has to have the direct experience of the actuality of infinity. Not, and again, this is just a pragmatic concern. It's just strategically at a certain point to see that this is, the short solution.
Well, I think you've done a wonderful job at that, actually. And, no, seriously, and we like to just be able to, at any moment, move directly into experience, into direct experience.
Yeah.
Is well, it's a yoga, right? So,
sure.
But as that's happening, I just less and less there's this sense that anything is ignorant or you see what I mean at all?
I'm not sure. Maybe. I mean, the question of ignorance is to me not a question. The question of apparent patterning is a real question and a real turning point.
Why?
Yeah. All problems that someone can believe they are stuck in exist because of interpretations based on apparent patterning. So how to deal with apparent patterning? If you can solve the problem of apparent patterning, you solve the problem of any possible problem that could exist. And the problem is actually solvable because apparent patterning is actually unlimited. And discovering that experientially.
Any looking is touching infinity.
Exactly so. Exactly. And this is the point.
And there's a smell, a quality
absolutely
to infinity.
Absolutely.
That begins to be noticeable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so actually nothing.
And that frees one from bondage. Essentially, bondage, which is being bound to one's own, one's own imagined limitations and stuckness, which is based on interpretations of apparent patterning as being actual.
That's very interesting. Is there a way to kind of cut through? I mean, because you can take it piecemeal, but at some point.
Well, you cut through it by experience, by what I call noticing, which is experiential.
Right.
It's completely non-analytical. It requires no thought or understanding whatsoever. Just a simple, direct experience outside the context, or relatively outside the context of an interpretation of what is being experienced or what's happening. And in that context, it reveals what it is. It reveals infinity, it reveals unstuckness, it reveals vitality, it reveals transcendentality, let's call it. Directly and intuitively without needing to explain itself or even be called any of those things.
I see that, but what I'm saying is that one can do that in every single circumstance.
Yes, absolutely.
But there's some sort of leaping off point again, that lets you go through that without stopping to look around while you're doing it. I mean, rather than having to reinvestigate that every time.
Right.
I see that is possible, but I'm just wondering about that inception point again.
I think one individually discovers this and stumbles upon it for oneself. I don't think it can be indicated or put as a formula.
It is helpful to know that the only way to get there is experientially.
Yeah, experience.
Because there's no amount of thinking about it or trying to figure it out in advance.
No. Experience itself is the open doorway. Experience is the doorway to liberation. Direct experience is the only place you can find liberation. And you find it by being with it as it is, and it shows you what it is, and which reveals what we're calling here infinity or the transcendental or what have you.
I mean, having the understanding that, in fact, that works in all circumstances, after all, is helpful to know. To
absolutely.
jump right in there.
Yeah, but I think ultimately one has to find this for oneself. Either the easy way or the hard way, depending on one's individual, how much cussedness one has.
Yeah, to understand it as a concept doesn't work.
No, absolutely not.
But an experience of the world as a fuzzy TV screen is not necessarily a necessary experience of infinity.
No, just experience the world as it is all. That's all. Just experience the world as it is, and you will be experiencing infinity. And that you are experiencing infinity is unimportant, and that we're calling it that is unimportant, and whether or not you know that is unimportant. It's the experience itself that matters.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is...
Experience transcends analysis. Experience transcends labeling. Experience is always more than you think it is, more than you can call it.
Well, experience of reality...
And there's no other experience, by the way.
Without patterning is not, this is the question, is not necessarily an experience of reality as a fuzzy TV screen. You still experience reality through patterning.
Sure, through patterning, sure. But whether or not it's patterns it becomes irrelevant. Experience doesn't come in patterns. Experience just comes as experience, and patterns comes through conceptualization.
Right. That's the ticket right there.
Experience doesn't say what it is. Experience doesn't say I'm a pattern.
That's it. Well, how is it experienced then?
Who knows? Who
How
knows?
experience is still within the confines of apparent patterns.
What? Say that again. There's no confines.
Well, patterns are assumed
Patterns is after there's experience, and then patterns are analyzed on the basis of experience.
Yeah. Wait,
you see what you see, and then you qualify what it is you see. But the seeing comes first.
So if you're seeing patterns.
No,
You're not.
No.
Okay, so then you're seeing fuzzy TV screen.
No. You're just seeing light.
You're just seeing.
And whether or not it's patterns and whether or not it's fuzzy is analyzed into existence.
Just light.
It's not even light.
Of course. Well, but I'm calling it light. Whatever you're seeing.
Seeing is seeing.
Anything that ends up as a metaphor is wrong.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just talk about seeing.
Yeah, seeing.
All right, just seeing.
Okay, seeing. Then stop there. Seeing.
Yeah,
Here's seeing, right? Here's seeing.
See. I'm seeing patterns everywhere.
You think you're seeing patterns?
No, I know I'm seeing patterns. I am seeing patterns. Fuzzy, given...
When you were 1 hour old and you were just out of your mother's womb, did you know you were seeing patterns?
You were seeing.
You were seeing? What were you seeing?
Maybe not. I don't know.
I think
what
Irma was an exception, actually. I think she came out and she was saying, "Oh my God, look at that! The light is just unlike the light in my mother's
room.
womb."
I hate this color.
That I probably did say.
I think it's a matter of mistaken. What's the word I'm looking for? Perception. The perceiving that because there's a grayness in what I'm calling now, I'm using words for it, a line and then something that looks red, that those are patterns. And they're not. They're just simply appearances. To say you're seeing them is also an assumed concept. A concept assumed on top of it, because it's being perceived. But to say you're seeing it or hearing it or anything is after the fact. It's an add-on.
Yeah, I mean the there's only one actual spiritual problem, and that is confusing direct experience with interpretation. And there's only one solution, which is to see that interpretation has absolutely nothing to do with perception.
I think part of the problem here is the word seeing,
Sure.
because it implies a visual something or other.
Yeah.
But radiant presence or
Sure.
whatever the infinity or whatever it is doesn't actually mean that you're seeing with your eyes something.
Of course.
And it's...
Well, that's why I
when you say
prefer
this-
that terminology.
When you're saying you're seeing patterns, the implication is that you're seeing shapes and connections, but all of that is not right. It's just infinity.
Yeah.
Or blob. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
In fact, it's actually better if it doesn't have any other connotations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it has no connotations, actually. Yeah. The imagination supplies them. It's like in a dream. You don't know what you're dreaming until you start interpreting it. And that's when you realize you're dreaming when you start interpreting it. Before you're interpreting dreaming, you're just asleep. And what's it look like? You can't say what it looks like because you're not interpreting it. It's just... And then all of a sudden this interpretation, and maybe this is a person talking to me, or maybe this is this, and all of a sudden it becomes that, like a Rorschach blot. All of a sudden it becomes all of these things. I mean, Rorschach blot is the perfect illustration. Is a Rorschach blot patterned or unpatterned? If you just look at a Rorschach blot, it's just like... But as soon as you let your imagination run wild, all of a sudden it looks like this, it looks like that, it's this, it's that, it's the... But it isn't any of those things. All of those things are imaginations that are being associated upon it. It itself is just... And this is a Rorschach blot. This is a Rorschach blot right here. It's nothing. It's. I mean, it is what it is, but it's...
But wouldn't you say a form? It appears as if there's form. It's not just frantic.
Why should it have to be frantic?
Well, okay, busy, moving, movement.
You know what it is? It's exactly nothing in particular.
Yeah. That's right.
It's nothing and it's in particular.
Form is emptiness and emptiness is form.
Yeah. I mean, this is what that sutra is all about. Yeah, but it's emptiness.
Sorry.
Go Buddhist.
Works.
Yeah. Team Buddhist.
I mean, at some level, there's sort of a categorical error that gets made. I mean, when...
It's a clerical error. I like that.
Categorical.
Oh, no, it's a clerical error.
When we're talking, when we're seeing, I mean, that's real. There's no question about that. It is what it is. But then the talking becomes about. Yeah. And it's the about that is all sort of made up and constructed in labels that I think Johnson continues to sort of. But if you could sort of see that it's a different thing, the about as opposed to the experience, then you can sort of see on the one hand how they end up getting connected, but they're not really the same thing.
Exactly. Interpretation has absolutely nothing to do with experience. And it pretends to.
I guess we should talk about what interpretation is.
Sure.
I mean, it's when the mind comes in and...
Any degree whatsoever of saying this is X is interpretation. This is a pattern. This is...
Before that happens, there's direct experience of...
No, there's no of until that happens. The of, as soon as the of happens, that's already interpretation.
That's mental.
Direct experience just is. It just is.
And experience is had.
No. You have experience of something.
No, you don't.
Experience.
You're wrong. You may not see that you're wrong, and you may not agree that I'm correct when I tell you you're wrong, but I tell you with absolute certainty that you're wrong.
So what you're saying then is experience is experience in and of itself without anything else.
Yes. 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 Bravo.
Okay, so now...
Which includes the experience of the phenomena of interpreting.
Wait, how could that even be?
Well, it doesn't make, it's irrational.
Wait, because we have senses.
No, we don't have senses. Senses are interpretations.
Okay, so we're talking about experience without senses.
No, yeah, experience without senses.
Right. And without...
Yes, okay, good.
Okay.
Your senses are an experience themselves.
There's no senses, there's no object, there's no subject, there's no seeing, there's no ear, no eye, no consciousness of a nose, no nothing. And yet...
And also no ending of it.
And yet...
Look at a dream.
From the peanut gallery, yes! You know when to wait to
exactly.
Right?
Irma, you just said it. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, okay, so...
And all of those assertions, all the senses, all of that is interpreted into existence. Fish don't know they're seeing. They don't know they're feeling. I'm just imagining.
There's
right?
recognition of experience. Now, are you...
Well, no. Verbally, there's recognition of experience, but experience itself is self-recognition. You could say...
Right, so self-recognition. I mean, there is something going on there in experience.
No, experience is something going on. There's not two things. There's not two things. Experience is a something going on.
It doesn't recognize itself. When experience is going, it would have to, in order for you to say that, you would have to have had the recognition of that happening.
No, it's more direct than that. Experience itself is recognition that experience is.
Yes.
Because it's not an inert event. It is consciousness. Let's say, or let's say it's intelligent. It's sentient. Let's call it.
What he's saying is experience is.
Yeah, experience is, and of course, experience is experience.
Yes. It's recognition, and it is.
But all of that argument doesn't add to the raw fact.
That's after the
fact.
I want to talk about the real.
Yeah.
Just
Get down to the real deal. Let's get down to the nitty gritty, girl. All right.
Get down, get up.
I don't know how you say it in French, but the French have a term for it. Mise en bime, I guess it is, and it's it's the image that you see when a mirror faces a mirror. Okay. I mean, like, what's that?
The question is right there.
That is the
from
recognition
George,
of recognition.
right there,
That's all.
Q.
Can you talk about
recognition is
conviction?
raw.
Authority from which you speak. How does that come about?
So
no, I can't.
Wait
without
he's
having to be anything.
Well, I guess he just told you, George.
All I can say is look for yourself and you'll ultimately find the same thing. That's the authority. The authority is because it happens to be that way, and you can discover for yourself that it's that way, and once you discover for yourself that it's that way, then you'll recognize the authority that is true. It can't be proved. It's not a matter of establishing lineages or credentials or...
Wait. So did you answer the question for George?
I think so.
Okay, let me ask. Yes. George says yes.
I don't think you have to have awareness of anything to have awareness.
Better.
This is the point. And again, we get into all sorts of semantic difficulty when we're talking about it, because words have subjects and objects and this versus that and things that are doing things and things that are being done, none of which is actually part and parcel of the way this works. This has no moving parts. It has no subjects. It has no objects. It has no things. It has no, there's no nouns and no verbs. It's just this. And what we call raw experience is this. And it is exactly itself. And then we can talk about, senses and bodies and form and patterning and continuity or no continuity or infinity. And we can talk about all that stuff, but none of that touches this. This is itself.
It's just amazing how we can make so much. We keep telling us what it is. It's like a stone miracle.
Yeah.
It's like
sure.
Like what? But
Yeah, miracle sums it up. If you can see that this is an impossible miracle, then you're home free. That's the finish line. This is a miracle.
How is this happening? Nobody knows anything about it.
It can't happen. It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's pure divine fiat. And all of our reasoning and analysis about it is all playing very inadequate catch up.
I mean, the mechanism of this, whatever that happens to be, is beyond.
No, it's inconceivable. It's transcendental.
PDN, pure divine feeling. What?
It's no good unless you know it, though.
Well, it is. It's good because it's good. The point is, the whole point of all the spirituality stuff is it is in fact knowable. It is in fact knowable, and what we talk about at great length is different tricks and techniques of stumbling upon the direct experience of that fact.
Well, it's the knowingness of it that is distinct from it itself.
No, it's distinct or not distinct is irrelevant and immaterial, and essentially non-existent. Forget about parsing.
Two things out of it. It's like knowing.
You just do it. You do it. You don't swim by saying, well, there's me and there's water. You swim by just swimming. And then when you're swimming, you can say, oh, look, I'm swimming and I'm in the water. But that's not making you swim. You're swimming because you're swimming.
And it's like I like to look at it.
Yeah, by all means, look at it all you want, but that won't do you any good.
Like a separation.
Yeah, but it looks like a separation, but it isn't really. How can you look at it? When you're looking at it, where are you? What are you doing? Is there anything separate from anything?
I'm appreciating it. I mean,
by all means, appreciate it. But when you're appreciating it, are you separating from it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to look.
Where are you when you're appreciating it? Where are you when you're looking at it? You're here. You're in experience. You never. You can't be. How can you be separate from it?
Well, I guess I think that's kind of where the of is.
Yeah, but look at where the of is, and it's right here. It's in experience, so even the of isn't really an of. Look at where it is. Look at what it is.
Get a sense of it, looking at itself.
Yeah, it can infinitely depart from itself and multiply itself, but it never actually becomes anything other than itself. That's the nature of infinity. It can appear to itself as all sorts of infinite divergences from itself, none of which actually depart from itself, and all of which is completely irrational and absurd, and yet is self-evidently the case. So don't let yourself be confused by that. Don't let yourself be confused by how infinitely differentiated this can appear within itself. It's infinitely differentiated, but it never becomes other than itself. And that infinite differentiation can appear along all sorts of apparent, let's call them axes of characteristics. It can have infinite differentiation of color, infinite differentiation of pitch, infinite differentiation of distance, infinite differentiation of all qualities whatsoever, of all, let's say, apparent qualities, and yet within this infinite differentiation there's no actual differentiation. It always is just exactly this, here, now. And it never leaves this here, now. And the fact that it can be that way is just endlessly weird. How can it be so infinitely differentiated and yet never depart from itself? I don't know. Damnedest thing. It's fucking weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible to think about the experience as if, well, that is an experience, but that is a different experience than this experience.
without thinking about it.
Yeah, it's possible to seem to have your experience be different from the experience, but it never actually is. It's just a seeming. And that all these seemings can occur is again completely unexplainable. But none of the seemings ever depart from this. This can generate endless seemings. I used to call them, what did I used to call them?
Resonant modes.
Yeah, resonant modes. Like a spark, they're just shooting off all these endless apparent sparks of apparent complete different modes that it can seem to be in and as. And yet all of them are just this. And they never actually go anywhere. They're all just this here. So it can seem like anything. It can seem infinitely distant from itself and other than itself and differentiated and all these things without ever going anywhere. It's always just this here now. And that's all that there is, this here now, always. And it never adds to itself, it never subtracts to itself, it never becomes less, it never becomes more. It never gets alienated from itself, it never gets closer to itself, it's always just exactly this here now. Regardless of what it looks like, that's just this here now that can do that. And still be this here now.
Dreaming is such a great metaphor.
Yeah, dreaming explains it all perfectly.
Almost.
Oh, it's perfect.
A dream can look like anything whatsoever, but it's always just a dream.
It's always just a dream.
And dreaming's always just dreaming. It never becomes more than dreaming, never becomes less than dreaming. Nothing is gained, nothing is lost, nothing is alienated, nothing is distanced, nothing is unified. It can look like absolutely anything. You can dream of absolutely anything, and it's just a dream. And the dream is always just this here now. And exactly the same thing's happening here. It can look like anything.
I'm hesitant to say this, but if we're not dreaming, what the heck could we point to? That'd be halfway decent.
When he said resonant modes, Pam says, haven't heard about resonant modes lately. In fact, I asked Leif if it was resonant modes.
Oh, resonant modes, yeah.
Resident moles. That's what we have in our lawn. They won't move out. They're just
staying.
They set up housekeeping. They're hung out of shingle.
Okay, question. Can I squeeze one in?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like the mind can change this to appear in a different way. So the mind can say, I'll go to the restaurant and have a nice meal, so it can seem that this here now can be different.
Sure.
Okay.
But when you're in a restaurant having a nice meal, it's actually just this here now, because there you are. As like always.
Yeah, there's no restaurant, there's no grocery.
Yeah, is it ever the case that anything other than, well, here you are, is happening?
Yeah.
And no matter where you go, there you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That kind of sums it up rather nicely in the vernacular.
Well, when you were saying earlier that someone might be saying that the earth is flat, and yet there's supposed to be evidence that it's round and this and that and the other, the truth of the matter is that the experience of it being flat, without calling it that, but just simply of it as it is more true than saying that it's round and then there's planets and all that stuff, because all those are add-ons.
Yeah, I was constructing an analogical argument, which was a big mistake, obviously.
Huge mistake. I opened up a class.
Sorry, guys. Go out and find yourselves a decent guru. I'm a fuck up.
That's all included. Yeah, we know.
There's this saying, Peter, in the classics, everything liberates and disappears. And you've talked a lot about everything being self-liberating.
Yeah.
Could you just expound on that and maybe tie it into this kind of a thread that's going through?
Yeah. Well, everything liberates and disappears in every sense, but in several senses. Everything liberates by being what it is, and by being what it is, it transcends what you're holding it to be, and so it disappears as what you're holding it to be disappears in the face of the actuality. And everything liberates and disappears literally in the sense that all experience vanishes. Where's yesterday gone? Where's your experiences of yesterday gone? Where's your experience of your breakfast yesterday gone? Where's your experience of your third year of your life gone? It's just gone. Bang, it's gone. It's liberated. Ain't causing anyone any problems now.
You have two kinds of... I see. That's interesting.
So in that sense as well. But in every sense, reality is what it is, and that is the powerful fact, and that fact reveals and actually embodies liberation. And liberation is the essential disappearance of all non-liberation, the disappearance of anything as limitation, anything as limitedness. Because reality is not, none of that exists in reality, in direct experience of reality reveals that that's the case. So everything, by its very nature, liberates and disappears.
It's like it's revealing itself to us, and we're
mastering
concepts and covering up again.
Yeah. And the fact that it still, none of the concepts are going to stick ultimately.
Right, you can't really do it.
You can't do it. No matter, you have to keep plastering them. You just have to keep plastering them, and there's nothing for them to stick on. So you've got to keep plastering them and keep plastering them. And even then, sooner or later, you're just going to get tired or get sick or go to sleep or die or something, and then who's going to do the plastering?
I wonder why you're even doing that. Why am I doing this?
What's reality doing the plastering?
When your data shows up.
Well, anyway, it's about quitting time, so good night, online people.
Good night to them.